talk, spit, spot. If not now, then when? Welcome to As Sarah Turns, where I talk about memoirs, my aspirations, and all the messy stuff in between. Hi, I'm Sarah. We are July 24th, 2025. And I'm coming in right under the wire today. It's almost 11 o'clock. Better hurry up before I turn into a pumpkin. Another part of my childhood, fairy tales. What childhood is not complete with, well, I don't know nowadays. Do they still read nursery rhymes and fairy tales? Probably not, right? But my generation still did. Like I said, I have the 1976 edition of Mother Goose's nursery rhymes. And well, you know, the classics, the Disney classics, Cinderella, Snow White, Beauty and the Beast, Sleeping Beauty, Rapunzel. I liked Rapunzel when I was a little girl. I think because I wanted to have long hair like Rapunzel. But Cinderella, I think she stuck out the most. The whole fairy godmother and the gown and the whole scene in the garden. I mean, bibbity bobbity boo, right? It didn't get much better than that. So magical. And then, of course, all the stuff before that, right? With the stepsisters and Cinderella. She always had something to do, right? She had all those tasks in order to get to the ball. And then, well, we know what happened. And then we know what happened. But the whole chores thing, and that she was like the maid, even though she was the true heir to the house, really. When I was a little girl, my father used to tease me. I mean, I think part of it, like, you know, when you're a kid, you have a totally different perception about things than when you're an adult, and you can look back and you can realize, you can just see things through a different lens, right? And as a child, I felt tormented by my father. He teased me and picked at me and made me do things I didn't want to do. And even my grandmother his mother would say, like, stop tormenting her, leave her alone. And, you know, and I think he wanted a boy, or maybe just because he's a, you know, he's a male, obviously, my father. They're just, well, boys are just more rough and tumble in general than girls normally, or at least they were. But I think he wanted a son, right? Or he was thinking he was going to have a son, or hoping he was going to have a son. And well, he got a girl. And so it didn't matter. He was still going to do son stuff with this girl, which was okay. But part of the fun stuff that probably is normally accepted and part of the rearing of boys is teasing and razzing and playing and wrestling and stuff like that. I don't know so much about girls, but it was in my childhood. I got roughed and tumbled and wrestled and farted on and and I don't even, and teased and called nicknames, including Cinderella. And he'd go, Cinderella, like when he had something he wanted me to do, and he'd be laughing, like it just tickled him how much it irritated me, right? Like a brother would tease a sister, maybe. But when you're a child and that's the adult and that's the rapport that's happening, and you're not made privy to the context, and you come to it with your own context, it could be traumatizing, to say the least. And I think I really do. The whole Cinderella thing really irritated me as a child. It's like, you know, and then I knew I had a chore to do, or I had something, like I had to go make them tea and toast, or or peanut butter and chocolate milk, peanut butter sandwich and chocolate milk. And one would say, oh, well, how hard is that? Well, let me tell ya. A lot like the stepsisters in Cinderella, how they were like, not that he was mean, but in the story they were mean and ungrateful. Not that my father was mean and ungrateful, but his demeanor and my perception through the eyes of a child and just wanting his approval and wanting his love and nurturing didn't see it through his eyes, right? And so he would call me Cinderella, and I would know automatically that there's some kind of something that I have to do, some obligation, some expectation that I have to fulfill that I likely didn't want to. And because I didn't want to, it felt like a burden. But because I was the child, I had no choice. And so you go along, and so you just learn what tasks are required of you, what steps in the task are required, and realize that the end result reflects directly upon you, and that you're responsible for it, and that therefore, if it doesn't meet the criteria that's expected of you, you cannot reproach the rebuke that you get, or being rebuked. and as a child, just wanting acceptance and praise, and my mode of operation, I guess, was to hurry up and get everything done and do it as well as I can, and anticipate what the next response, the next obligation or expectation might be, and make sure that I fulfill it, so that I'm not only done what was required of me, but one step beyond, and now there is no room for any rebuking or micromanaging. Well, there always was. Well, no, there wasn't. I mean, eventually I got it all down, but that's a learning, and that's a conditioning, and that's building up of resentment. Because like I said, you would think tea and toast or peanut butter sandwich and chocolate milk is no big deal. But like I said, there was a lot of conditions about how that had to be made and how that had to be delivered. It was a certain kind of bread, and it had to be cut to a certain thickness, and it had to be toasted to a certain darkness. Now, okay, I like my toast toasted too, and I don't like warm bread. What's the point of having toast? But like, if I'm asking someone to make me toast, and here, this was the difference, right? He might have disguised it as asking, but really his behavior and the context and delivery suggested that it was an expectation, and it was an obligation, and I had no wiggle room to say anything. I was expected to do it the way he wanted it, point final. And so these things shape you, right? These are forms of baggage, trauma, maybe even to some degree. And I'm not saying this like as woe is me, I'm wearing my heart on my sleeve. I'm saying these are things that I deem to have fallen under correct training that has strengthened the character. Now, it might not seem like the correct training or the correct way to go about the training, but the end result still came true, right? So he'd be particular, not just the kind of bread, and not just the thickness, and not just the darkness of toasted, the degree of toastedness, but the butter, it had to be butter, which was fine. I totally agree with that too. But the butter had to be squished in really well, and it had to be melted, and then the crust had to be like I would take the knife and kind of chop it around the sides of the crust, and then you can like really butter the butter in, and it gets all over the whole piece of toast. And then the crust isn't too hard, and he can bite into it because he had false teeth. He has false teeth. He's still alive, of course. And then, oh wait, we're still not finished. Butter, and then peanut butter, right? And then the tea had to be a certain mug, a certain size. I'm the same way though. My tea's in a certain size in a certain mug, and I do like it a certain way. But I'm the one making it. I'm not asking anyone else to make it. And if they do make it and they don't make it exactly right, and I've not shown them and they've not learned, and they're just a fly-by maker, then who am I to criticize it and complain, right? But no, my father felt it was his right as my father to make that demand, which I'm under his roof. He's paying the bills. He's feeding me. He's sending me to school. You know, but didn't mean that I liked it. And it didn't mean that that had to be the way that it was done. It didn't mean that that was the lesson that had to be learned. And likely this whole Cinderella thing that I came away with as baggage, which has served me, don't get me wrong. It is actually, I think, a strong point, right? Like, I am always on task, and I make sure that I do the due diligence, as everyone says now. I make sure I execute everything correctly. I double check, and then I try and figure out what one step beyond would be, so that my service to whoever my customer is, friend, whoever I'm doing the service for, it doesn't have to be an actual service that you're paying in a business or whatever, right? We're just talking about people. But even down the road, if I were to have a business, how I would conduct my business, or if I was in a position to be managing or running or leadership, these are parts of the qualities that ring true, right? It's part of who I am, what my correct training is that is strengthening my character to this point in time, that has brought me here to even taking the accountability to own up to what I've procrastinated and put off about. Why? Because if not now, then when? And I was reared better. I was reared to rise to the occasion, to do what was expected, to find a way, to persevere, right? Cinderella, okay, she breaks down. I don't know how much persevering in the garden that is. But she's redeemed. And she pursues, and she, is humble, and she is rewarded. Now, I took all that away from the fairy tale, but what I took away from the Cinderella in context of my father's and my interaction or engagement, that yeah, I'm Cinderella, and I have to clean up all the messes, and I have to fix everything, and I have to hurry up and do that if I want to go to the ball, and all the mess in the house in the story in Cinderella is symbolic of all the potential messes and hurdles and everything you have to overcome in life to get to your goal, right? and once you get the ball is your goal, and that reward, that's your that's your time, that's your kickback, that's the light on you, that's the time that you get to shine, right? Because you've fulfilled all the other expectations and obligations, and now it's for you. So in my childhood, I always felt that I had to hurry up and do all my chores and do all my homework and do all these things that my parents expected me to do before I could sit down and actually have time to myself and not have to be accountable to anyone. There wasn't a lot of time for that. And so I think that has provided correct training to strengthen my character, because later on in life, because of all of the experiences I have of my youth being so close in age to my parents, and them still kind of growing up themselves, so I'm learning alongside of them at their time of life as well as my time of life, I think has given me a really interesting perception of life and how to tackle problems and how to manage crisis and how to roll with the punches and flow like the seaweed and be the water. You name the cliche. I'm a Pisces. I'm a chameleon. I can do it. I can do it all, right? And there's something rewarding about that. And I get that from my parents too. My mother always said, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And boy, oh boy, there was plenty of situations where I could have died emotionally from emotional trauma in my childhood and never came back right, It's funny, it's funny how the weather, so I'm going to bring up the weather. I would have come out earlier, but I was running behind. Because as I said, as Sarah turns, I never know how the day's going to go. And I had a whole bunch of expectations last night set up for this morning when but shortly after I rose from my slumber, all of that went out the window. And there was indeed a crisis that needed to be handled and managed. And therefore, I had no choice, right? Everything else, all those other expectations and responsibilities that were set for today, they no longer were the priority. This big problem that came out of nowhere needed to be fixed. And so I spent the day addressing that until that was taken care of, because the end result reflects on me, and I have a standard and I have a code that I hold myself accountable to, as well as others who work with me, right? And I'm not gonna hold you accountable for something that I myself have no experience in, because because I don't think that's right. Like, I'm not gonna give you a hard time about something I've never done myself, you know? Just like I'm not going to ask you to do something that I can't even be bothered to do for myself, because it's just not right. And I think maybe that's part of being self-efficient, right? And I think that's part of being from my generation, and obviously the kind of parents that I had. They were not helicopter parents by any means. Well, I mean, for some ways they were, but for the most part, they were free range. So, yeah, it's interesting what parts of our life, what experiences, what little stories, what fairy tales, right, ring true and make memories and make you nostalgic. That's where I was going with the weather. The weather wasn't that conducive today. It was really hot and sticky, and so I wasn't sitting out in the sun earlier. And then we were expecting rain, but the rain came, but I was already behind in schedule from having a crisis earlier in the day that needed to be managed, and like, that's just the way it is. And so like I said, I'm running behind, and then it started to rain. And so then I couldn't sit out in the back like I normally do, and the rain is just now letting up. But like I said, it's almost, it must be after 11 o'clock now. But this is the only place that it was still dry, and I just prefer to be out in the open. But as I was watching the rain out of the kitchen window, at dusk, I could see a pink cube in the horizon behind the trees, and the rain was coming down pretty heavy. And it made me feel nostalgic. And then, like, I wasn't nostalgic at first. It was just kind of like a cozy, kind of like, oh, it's been a long day, but now it's cooling off. Like, it was 94 today, and once that rain hit, it dropped like 20 something degrees. So it's a little chilly. Actually, I had a sweater handy, but I'm okay. So I guess I didn't need it. But I thought I was going to. And like I said, it wasn't quite dusk, and I just kind of had this feeling of like when I was a kid, you know, around somewhere between 8 and 10 years old, when you still kind of have like a scheduled bedtime, and like, you know, like summer just seems endless. You know that, remember that age when summer seemed endless? And where you've had a long day, maybe swimming in the pool or something, and then the weather changed, and now you come in and you take your wet bathing suit off and you're drying off, and now you're getting a bit of a chill, and so you put something cozy and a little thick on, and your mother says, okay, you're like, it's time for bed soon, and you're like, oh, can I stay up and watch something on TV? And she's like, well, if you put your pajamas on and brush your teeth and you're all ready, then you sit in the sofa, and then as soon as it's over, then you go to bed. You know, and you're all excited, and you get all nestled in, and it's like some kind of, like tonight it kind of felt like if I was going to sit down and watch a movie, maybe I'd watch American Quilt with Winona Ryder. It's got a nice summer feel to it. It takes place in the summer itself. It's a coming of age kind of milestone movie with a lot of heritage and tradition, you know? And I don't know. And then I was thinking about different kinds of nostalgia, like I was kind of nostalgic for home, like not just that feeling of youth, but for that feeling of home and that comfort and that, like, kind of like a homesick. And then I started thinking, well, you know, what are you homesick for? Like, what kind of, and all I could think about were like memories of that. It wasn't so much like memories of all three of us being together, because I don't think I have a lot of those, you know, like there's camping trips and vacations and holidays when the whole family is there. And sure, like there were like, for a while, we would all sit down on Sunday nights and at 6 o'clock and we'd watch Walt Disney from 6 to 7, because my dad used to do that when he was a little boy, you know. And so little traditions, the traditions, I guess, are what I'm homesick for of my youth. And then I thought about, you know, I think there's also a nostalgia that's like where you long for something you've never had, that you've never actually experienced, but you have this sense that you just miss it and you miss having it. Like sometimes I feel like I'm born in the wrong time, you know, like I should have been born anywhere from 1950 to like the 1700s or something. I mean, I know life for women back then was a lot harder than it is now, and we have the easiest way of life than we ever have had up to this point in civilization. But for some reason, I have a nostalgia for a time that is long since passed, that I have never experienced, that I have romanticized in my head for some reason. And that too is part of who I am and what makes my creativity and fuels my imagination and is the muse for what my brand is, whatever. We haven't quite pinpointed that, but all of these things that we've been talking about are the compilations of over the years of what I am, what has made me into the woman and lady that you see before you at the age of 49. And then I think there's also a nostalgia for something that you know you'll never have, like a loss for like a person or something, you know, or sorry, I'm trying to imagine it and put it into words, like what the feeling is, trying to put myself back there. And so when I look off, it's not that I'm trying to not make eye contact. I know it's rude to not make eye contact. But if you were sitting here right beside me and we were talking, I'd probably, you know, I'd gaze up that way because I'm trying to fabricate it in my, I have it fabricated, but I'm trying to articulate the feeling. And now I've gone way off tangent. Way off on a tangent. Listen to the rhythm of the falling rain, telling you what a fool I've been. Oh, I can be foolish and fun and silly. The fool hasn't a care in the world, right? Ignorance is bliss. I never heard of that expression until I moved to Korea. I guess to some degree I led a sheltered life. In my world, growing up with my parents, ignorant was word with a bad context. You didn't want to be ignorant. Ignorant had two definitions in our household. Either you were ignorant because you didn't know any better, you were just uneducated, which is not your fault, so it's not really a bad ignorant. And then there was ignorant that you know better and you did it anyway. And I guess the first one is kind of ignorance is bliss, but ignorance is bliss is a much nicer way to say it. But when I moved to Korea and I heard, like, that was what my cousin had said to me, like, in the first week. He's like, well, like, their motto here, or some, not motto, but whatever, like what they say here, right? Ignorance is bliss. And oh my God, I was like, what? But at 40, that was when I was 26, right? When you're all full of spunk and fire that's mistaken for arrogance. But at 49, that saying has its place. It does. I mean, I try not to, I like to know things. I like to be in the know. I like to be multitask oriented. I like to be able to, the more knowledge you have, the more keys you have to doors. That's just all there is to it. So, but the older I get, there are some things where I'm like, I don't have room for that. I just don't have room for that. I'm not ready to know anything more about that yet. So we're not inquiring, we're not researching, we are content to be ignorant at the moment. Because one also needs to know one's capacity for input and execution of, and processing and execution of one's intake of the input. And I have learned mine. I know what my limits are. You know, they're not there's not a lot, but I know how quickly, I know what overloads me. And so I take my information in bits. I think actually, I think, you know what, like sometimes I do things and I don't even know that they're a thing until I hear a label for it. And it's not until I start saying the label quite a bit that I realize, oh my God, I was doing that before I even realized there was a label for it. Oh, and I lost that thought. Sorry, I have been scattered all day today. For the love of Pete. Well. The bloody transcript recorder fell asleep, so I don't even know if I'll be able to use that. See, you never know what's gonna happen unless Sarah turns. This never falls asleep. I use the voice memo for other things all the time. I have a 11-hour or 14-hour recording on it, and it never went to sleep. I'm at 29 minutes. I don't know what the recording on the video is, but I'm at 29 minutes. Huh. We'll have to see. Anyway, boy, I've like left you hanging on all kinds of fronts here this evening, and I think I'm far too scattered to pull them all into one. Other than the fact that they are all things that have influenced me over the course of my childhood, right? That have contributed to who I am. As well as, and that's what you need to do, right? Start looking. What are the little memories that have been frozen in time that have visited you again and again, and try and see what the meaning is, and can you see any kind of way that they have manifested? I mean, it doesn't have to be exact, you know, like I'm not Well, no, I can't give you examples right now without going into another story that I have already reserved for another playlist. So, how are we gonna wrap it up? How about I just remind you that there's no time like the present, and that you're always, whether you realize it or not, you're working towards what you want. So make sure you're really precise about what you want. And the more you think about it, the more you reminisce, the more you ruminate, the more you reflect, right? The better understanding you have of who you are and what your role is, how to fulfill it, and how to be happy, right? Reflection on your experience, your past experience. There's no mistakes, right? There's only experiences. There are mistakes when you repeat it. That's the indicator you didn't learn a lesson. You didn't come away with anything, right? But short of that, even if you didn't succeed in the outcome you set out to do, you still tried, you still did something, you still reflect, and you still tried to move forward. You still tried to find a correlation. You tried to find the path or the pattern that is the thread of your life. But none of that can happen without accountability, without showing up, right? Analyzing your behavior and being a critique of yourself and connecting it with the end results of situations that you're involved with, that you're not happy with, really requires each of us to look onto ourselves before we turn around and point the finger at someone else, right? I know that has nothing to do with fairy tales or Cinderella or anything else I talked about. Maybe we had to say all that stuff just to get to there. But if I didn't do any self-reflecting, and if I didn't want to be in a better position than I had found myself in, I wouldn't be sitting here now in front of you talking. I wouldn't be taking the time every night now and looking forward to it, looking forward to building this world with you, if I hadn't done all that reflecting, because I wouldn't have anything to talk about. If I didn't self-critique and try to become better, if I didn't realize my role and my accountability in everything that I engage in, then I wouldn't have adventures, and I wouldn't have experiences, and I wouldn't have growth. You know, it's important to have people in your life. Oh, well, this is not going to work. I just give up. It's important to have people in your life that that support you because they are genuine, right? You do unto others, you expect others to do unto you. I've tried my whole life to implement that. And it's hard, right? Because there's a lot of people that don't think past the end of their nose. But not here, right? At any rate, that's the neighbor's parrot. And I think I'm just babbling now. I have too many thoughts rolling around to tie it all up into a neat bow tonight. And that's part of being raw, unscripted improv, right? I think I'm on the down. I'm a little anticlimactic at the moment. But every decision that I've made, I guess, has brought me right up to this point. It's good. It's all good. As Mommy says, it's all what we make it. Okay, typical Canadian style. I probably said let's wrap it up 5 times, which is equivalent to saying goodbye. So, I'm so glad you came tonight. Thank you so much. Don't forget, tune in tomorrow, because you never know where I'm going to be. Well, sorry. You probably know where I'm going to be. You're just not going to know what I have done during the day, or the epiphanies that I had, or the thoughts that I'm going to share. Neither do I. Although, you know how many times during the day, especially today, there was like 3 or 4 times I was like, my thoughts were just going, and I had all kinds of just ideas, and I was like, I should just be recording all of this and just make them like outtakes for in the future. Unseen footage. Never before rare. Behind the scenes. I didn't even get dressed until 2 o'clock this afternoon. I was so busy I didn't have time. You know, obviously I was wearing pajamas that were presentable. As Sarah turns, tune in tomorrow. Can't guarantee it'll be the same time, but it'll be tomorrow. I got dreams to remember. Can you remember your dreams? I got dreams to remember. That's it.